My mother was involved in the spiritualist church. I do remember that her involvement used to cause a lot of conflict between her and my father. She had a very spiritual outlook to life, whereas my father was completely the opposite. He was a good man. He didn't believe in the supernatural. He didn't even really believe in God. Our first house was a Victorian house in Highgate Cemetery. It was actually haunted, and it wasn't a very nice ghost that used to speak. Usually when my parents were out, I could never understand what it was saying, but there was a distinct voice, although it was actually coming out of the wall. On 2 or 3 occasions, I glimpsed a figure in the corridors. I told my father, he said, "Don't talk such nonsense, you know, the ghosts don't exist." But my mother's attitude was, yes, there may be something here, but don't be frightened of it. She explained a lot about the nature of, if you like, ghosts, unexplained apparitions. Unfortunately, my mother died in 1959. That had a tremendous impact on me. I felt as though somehow I'd lost part of my life. I was only 13 years old. I rebelled against school. I just refused to learn anything. I just didn't think material knowledge was important. And it's because I just persistently refused to learn and do homework and upset the other boys. They asked me to leave. This was Hendon, the preparatory school. Then I went to a boarding school in Sussex. I actually ran away from school twice because I just wanted to get home again. First time I was apprehended by a teacher. Second time I got back to London. My father sent me back again. Apparently the headmaster said, "Look, he's just not going to learn anything. You might as well take him away from the school." Third school was Weymouth. That was a private school. It was in the days when everybody had short back and sides. I refused to get it cut, and he said, "Well, I'm going to give you a choice. You get your hair cut or you're going to have to leave the school." So I said, I prefer to leave the school. I went travelling around Europe for a short while. I was very young, I was only 15. And I hitchhiked down to Marseille. I was doing odd jobs down there. Picking grapes, picking pears, moving deck chairs on the beach. And I ended up going down to Sicily. I was working in a hotel. It was the off season, so I was quite lucky to get a job. I came back when I was 16, 17. I sought out friends of my mother's, her acquaintances that just attended the spiritualist church. I ended up meeting a lady who was herself a high priestess in Wicca. I was actually initiated into it in 1964. It's a religion based on the powers of human psyche, understanding consciousness, finding powers in the cosmos, powers in consciousness within ourselves. In the mid-60s, witchcraft slowly became fashionable. Once something starts getting fashionable, it attracts people that want to sort of use it for personal gain.
Witchcraft, I would say, is the exercise of occult forces which might or might not involve the worship of the devil.
They actually believe that they are worshipping the true God, the God that governs over the material world. I was trying to reach that power that gave everything life. I remember once there was a story in the Hampstead and Highgate Express. This was, I must have been about 10 or 11, about a haunted house in Hampstead Lane, which was just past Highgate Village. And it was lived in. When as young children, we all were really excited. I think we knocked on the door and it asked about the stories of the ghost. Back in '66, I was involved with a group of people, if you like, psychic investigators. We used to explore local places near London that were reputedly haunted. I founded, with other people, the British Psychic and Occult Society. It attracted musicians, doctors. One person that actually approached me in those days, who actually had a high interest in Highgate Cemetery itself, was Joe Meek. We follow up reports of, shall we say, strange goings-on. Even spent a night in a particular house at old ruined monasteries and abbeys and churches in the countryside where there have been reports of unexplained apparitions. We just try and find out what the cause of these apparitions is. And we don't really feel that there's any point in trying to interfere with something that's almost natural. One was on a so-called haunted lake near Welwyn Garden City. In the middle of the night, about 3:30, we distinctly saw a tall shape. It appeared to resemble a lady. It looked to be about 8 feet tall. In the middle of the lake, all the location shots were perfect. They all came out, but that particular negative was completely blank. On one occasion, a person was thrown to the ground with tremendous force, and that actually happened in the ancient Ram Inn when we were spending 1 or 2 vigils down there. The common conclusion by people is that the spirit may have happened to have died in a particular house, therefore the spirit has remained earthbound and is haunting the building. I think psychic energy can lay harboured in buildings for many centuries, and is dependent on not only a recent family living there, but people who may have lived there in the past. The impressions, and I think it's highly conceivable that sometimes that can remain in a particular building.
It was a village which really was a gateway to the city, and merchants would come down from the north.
Soon after the Norman conquest, Bishop of London built a castle there to use as a hunting lodge. By the 15th century it had fallen into ruins. Then it was allegedly used by the Duchess of Gloucester, who had hired a witch and an unfrocked priest to do a curse to kill Henry VI, so that her husband, the Duke of Gloucester, would become king in his place.
It was a place where many famous people would go to take the air. I'm not surprised that a cemetery was built in Highgate.
In the 1830s, the ordinary churchyards had run out of space, so the government passed a bill allowing the sort of opening of private cemeteries.
Highgate Cemetery, officially opened in 1839, was once described as the most beautiful resting place in London.
If you wanted to be buried in Highgate Cemetery, you had to have money.
Vandals stalking around the overgrown tombs have done over £9,000 worth of damage.
As much land on the pass he thinks he needs, and he thinks that I'm going to be there year after year, waiting till the end of the season while he's got another thing coming. I want to do stuff, see the world, not just the back of some bloke's head on a Saturday afternoon. He wouldn't recognise half the people in here unless the Arsenal team died. He'd say it's just a smelly old graveyard. So I say, famous people are buried here. Ah! Shell!
Tombs were being broken open, coffins smashed open, crosses knocked over.
For the general foreman of the grave diggers, it's worsened an already harrowing job.
Down this part here, there's 2 tombs broken into. One on the left-hand side here, the doors were broken open. The coffin was half pulled over and a big iron stake stuck through into the coffin.
Highgate Cemetery has always been reputed haunted.
Whenever I visited Highgate Cemetery, been in the cemetery, or walked up and down Swains Lane, we either feel as if we've been through intense black fog that sapped our energy.
I was walking past the main gate, again about 8 in the evening, and I felt there was something there.
Many psychic phenomena are associated with ley lines, lines of energy which run across the Earth's surface, and in much older times they often join together sacred stone buildings or churches. There's quite a large ley line. It runs through Highgate and onto Highgate Cemetery, where it connects with the Circle of Lebanon.
It comes from Parliament Hill, through the cemetery, up through the Gatehouse and Hillcrest Flats.
There have again been reports in one of the flats there on the ground floor of a tall dark figure seen in one of the rooms. And it then goes on through Highgate Woods and is marked by an old Roman settlement.
As we looked down towards the path, we both saw a black cloak hooded figure.
In the flask, there have also been reports of a tall black figure. Glasses have been known to shatter, lights go on and off.
Along at the Gatehouse there have been stories of a similar cloaked figure that's been seen in the cellar.
We launched an investigation into the history of Highgate Cemetery, and we actually learned that a tall dark figure had been seen back in Victorian era.
Have you ever seen this vampire?
I heard about all these reports, and I was trying to find some logical explanation for it. Passing the top gate, I actually saw this apparition, this figure myself. The very first reaction was somebody dressed up in a black cloak trying to frighten passers-by, but it wasn't. Area turned very, very cold, and it was a bitterly cold night. It appeared to have 2 points of light, which I took to be its eyes. You couldn't really make out a face.
And it seemed to glide off the path without making any noise.
After about 4 seconds, maybe even less, but it seemed like an eternity, the figure just wasn't there, it had gone. What I witnessed was definitely not a human being. I just put it down to maybe an earthbound entity. We had people up in Highgate Cemetery in pairs at night, taking their turns with cameras trying to get some photographic evidence. Technically I realise we were trespassing, but we never caused any damage. That is the whole point. I wrote a letter to the local press, I believe it was the Ham and High, asking for information from local people about the sightings of the figure. And quite a few people replied. One was an old lady walking a dog past the gates of the cemetery one night, and the dog started to whine. It tried to drag her back down the road, And she actually told me she'd seen a tall, dark figure with hypnotic red eyes. Another person who'd seen it in the cemetery. He sensed something behind him, and he swung around, and he witnessed the same figure.
There are accounts of people being pushed over, accounts of people seeing this and running away.
Our first report indicated that there may be a vampire in Highgate Cemetery. As far as we know, it has only physically attacked one male person who has passed by the gate, but there are others who amply attest to have been visited by it in their beds at night. One young lady sports 2 puncture marks on her neck just here.
Certain other people had appeared on the television, twice to be exact, and produced a cross and a stake, and instructed people, gullible people, how to stake a vampire.
The only certain way of destroying an undead is by driving a wooden stake, like the one I have here, straight through the heart with one blow.
Like this?
By decapitation and by burning.
But David has always maintained that it wasn't a vampire.
I do not accept the existence of blood-sucking vampires. Type that stepped out of a Hammer horror movie, doesn't cast a reflection in a mirror, is repelled by holy water, the sign of the cross, which can only be destroyed by being staked through the heart. I think that's absolute sheer and utter nonsense.
Sometimes the spirit of a dead person will look like an absolutely solid body. People may see that and think that the body has literally come out of the grave. I don't believe they could come back to life, and even if they did, they'd be stuck within a coffin.
Now, this particular person said Mr. Farrant intends to return to the cemetery this evening and hunt through the coffins and stake the vampire. It was shown all around London, on the ITV channel. That's what caused all the crowds. Police surrounded the cemetery.
Highgate really first became famous in 1970 with the sort of vampire hunt.
About 5 of us went to Highgate Cemetery with the intention of performing a psychic séance. We had small Celtic crosses. I had my camera, a portable tape recorder, we had candles, we had incense. I had a stake, but attached to the stake was a piece of long cord. The idea of that was to try and cast a magical circle, trying to make communication to find out what was its purpose. All this started to take place at the top on a flat piece of land of the Circle of Lebanon.
But that night, police on the prowl for vandals discovered him.
We suddenly saw flashlights in the distance and we heard quite a few loud voices. The next thing we knew, police were approaching. The others, they split up in twos and went back towards the main gate. I headed to the right of the police because I knew people that lived in South Grove and its garden backed onto Highgate Cemetery. I got caught by a flashlight.
Stop where you are! Is there a problem, officer? No, it's full well that there's a problem.
I promise you, this is perfectly harmless.
I was taken to Kentish Town Police Station and interrogated about stories of a vampire. Let's be clear here, you can't actually be charged with vampire hunting. Charge me with being in an enclosed area for an unlawful purpose. I refused to name the other people to avoid bad publicity being attracted to the society. The inspector in charge of the case made a deal with me. He said, look, if you just plead guilty in the morning at Clerkenwell Court, you'll just get a technical warning of trespass. The case will be over without any publicity and that'll be the end of it. When I got into court, I pleaded guilty. He said that I had made a statement to him to the effect that I had gone to the cemetery with the intention of staking the king vampire of the undead. All they produced as evidence after I pleaded guilty was a cross and the stake. Because I pleaded guilty to it, all this was being believed. I immediately changed my plea to not guilty. The magistrate added that he was quite satisfied at the end. He said, well, he was quite satisfied. It was not my intention to damage coffins. The press were present. This was reported, and I became branded as a vampire hunter.
The rituals, the publicity, the court case have attracted to Highgate all kinds of undesirables.
I was held indirectly responsible. Now these kids, or vandals, had gone into the cemetery one night. They'd found an open coffin, took the corpse out, which is over 150 years old, and they propped it up in the steering wheel behind this guy's car. Now the police came to see me about it. They claimed I said to them, look, corpse was taken for purposes of black magic. He told the judge that the police officer was lying, full stop. The jury didn't believe him, and I was acquitted. A picture that police had found in my flat, standing over an open coffin, appeared in Titbits in 1972. And I'd gone to Highgate Cemetery with a reporter because he was doing an article on vampirism.
The article would have us believe that David was responsible for the damage, and he told me that he wasn't responsible for the damage, that the body in the coffin, the lid was already off.
The police called the cemetery superintendent as a prosecution witness. Although all the lead was missing, the body, or rather the skeleton inside it, was completely untouched. But the judge said, well, if Mr. Farrant even moved that coffin, that constitutes interference. I got 2 years for it. I was approached by American Magazine doing an article on black magic Satanism. They'd asked me if I got any photographs of naked witches. I took a picture of a naked girl in this vault, and she was kneeling on the floor. When the police raided my flat in 1974, they found the picture of the naked girl, and the judge went berserk. And I got 6 months imprisonment. A person came to see me who was a member of the society. He'd been beaten up quite badly. I sent a voodoo effigy to each one of these police officers that had assaulted him. Those who harm the initiated will become a victim of their own intentions. Your evil will be returned to you before another month is through. The police decided to add that as an extra charge. I got 2 years for sending voodoo effigies. And I was charged with 5 offences relating to Highgate Cemetery. I got found guilty of 2 of them. In August 1970, one particular person claimed that he'd actually saw the vampire asleep in the coffin with its mouth was still gorged with blood. He was about to stake it, but he was talked out of it by the other people, and so he just performed an exorcism.
Satan, get ye behind me and be gone from this place forever.
The vampire had now taken up refuge in an old Gothic mansion in Crouch End, and they claimed to have discovered it. They dragged the coffin out into the overgrown garden. Then the person claimed he drove his wooden stake through its heart. The thing gave out an almighty roar, as if from the bowels of hell. The vampire turned to a sluggish slime and viscera in the bottom of the casket. They then fetched a can of petrol from the car and incinerated it. End of Highgate Vampire.
So we went around to the area, found the house. One old lady told us that she'd lived in the area for many, many years. We asked her if she remembered a scream as if from the bowels of hell and fires being lit. She didn't remember the scream as if from the bowels of hell, but she doesn't remember any coffins being lit.
I do accept the existence of some entities that can remain earthbound. There's the existence of the incubus and the succubus, which go back decades, centuries. I've interviewed quite a few people who've had this experience. Sleeping people at night, they suddenly wake them up, and people find themselves absolutely paralysed. People become anemic. There's a loss of appetite, are prone to bouts of sleepwalking, and also vivid nightmares.
It isn't hardly ever reported in print anymore, but I've met women telling me about this. It still happens.
The point is that when Bram Stoker came to write Dracula, I am quite convinced he was aware of all these symptoms, and he turned these entities into blood-sucking vampires.
Ghosts can be a few things. They can be the actual spirit of a deceased person that has failed so far to make it over to the other side, or it can be a kind of psychic memory. You seem to have what they call psychic tape recordings.
Because of how these ley lines work and allowing these energies to come forth, these thoughts are still imprinted there. These thoughts are there, and if one is in a receptive mood, one can pick up that atmosphere and a figure.
You had the modern mythology promoted by the media generally, which actually allowed a sort of a big myth to build up.
The Highgate Cemetery evokes a feeling of atmospheric dread, and with the right priming, anyone can think or believe that there is a vampire or indeed any kind of supernatural being at large in that cemetery.
People, through believing in something, can create thought forms, what in Tibet they call tulpas, that could actually take on a kind of life of their own. Maybe that's what the ancient Egyptians do. They created guardians for the tombs.
More and more people are going to hear the story, more and more people are going to be influenced, and more people are going to be likely to actually see it.
Just possibly the spirit could get energy from people believing in it. If you got rid of the modern media, I believe people would still see spirits from time to time. But I don't believe the media is going to go away, so yes, you probably are going to have these panics again and again.
If it wasn't for the media, David wouldn't be as bad as he's painted. Certainly with other people's involvement, and possibly David's personality at the time. He wanted to be a bit rebellious, I don't know. Maybe he just encouraged it, perhaps.
I don't have any regrets about anything I do. I always believe life is part of a learning process. I'd just like to be considered as a disciple of life. Nothing more, nothing less.